Personally, I find it really quite disturbing and quite disrespectful, not only to Zach and Addie, but also to their families and friends and people who knew them. Hello lovely people, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you've just joined us. My name is Nell, and for today's video we're going to be diving into the rather dark story of the Rampart Street Murder House. Now, before we do begin, just a quick disclaimer, this story is probably one of the most intense stories that I've covered. It includes topics such as substance abuse, alcohol abuse, murder, suicide, and mental health problems such as bipolar, PTSD and depression. If any of these subjects do affect you, then absolutely by all means feel free to click out of here and find a less graphic story that I've covered. I totally understand. For everyone else, grab a drink, dim the lights, and let's get into it. On the evening of October 17th, 2006, police were called to the Omni Royal Orleans Hotel, where staff had reported the body of a young man on the roof of the parking lot. Now, when police first arrived, they were unsure whether it's been a result of the young man jumping or having been pushed or what it was. So they started investigating the body, trying to find some form of identification. And in one of the pockets, they find in a little plastic bag a letter, a key, and some dog tags. The letter they found read as follows: "This is not accidental. I had to take my own life to pay for the one I took. If you send a patrol to 826 North Rampart, you'll find the dismembered corpse of my girlfriend Addie in the oven, on the stove and in the fridge, along with full documentation on the both of us and a full signed confession from myself, Zach Bowen." When the police rushed to the address written on the note, what they found was something directly out of a horror movie. The first thing that they noticed upon arriving was just how cold the apartment was, and they discovered that the air conditioning had been turned right down to 60 degrees, so it was like a meat locker. They also discovered quite chilling messages on the walls written in silver spray paint, messages such as "Don't look," "I'm a failure," and "Tell my wife I love her." But it was what they found in the kitchen that was the most sickening of all. They found the charred head of a young woman in a pot on the stove, alongside the hands and feet of who they assumed to be the same woman in another pot next to it. Arms and legs were in a roasting tin in the oven, and police also discovered the torso in the fridge. Investigators also discovered entries written by Zach in the back of Addie's diaries, one of which read, "Today's Monday, 16th October, 2 AM. I killed her at 1 AM Thursday, 5th of October. I very calmly strangled her. It was very quick. Halfway through the task, I stopped and thought about what I was doing. The decision to halt the first idea and move to plan B, the crime scene you are now in, came after a while. I scared myself, not by the action of calmly strangling the woman I've loved for 1.5 years and desecrating her body, but by my entire lack of remorse. I've known for forever how horrible of a person I am. Ask anyone, and decided to quit my jobs and spend the 1,500 cash I had, being happy until I killed myself. So that's what I did. Good food, good drugs, good strippers, good friends, and any loose ends I may have had. I didn't contact any of my family, so that will explain the shock. I had a fantastic time living out my days. It's just about time now. So the two questions were, who were these two and what the hell had happened to lead to something as chilling as this crime scene? Well, Zach Bowen has moved from California to New Orleans to basically start a new life for himself. He'd married young, and he and his wife had 2 young children together. But by the time he and Addie met, he and his wife had been long separated. And Zach had been in the army in order to try to support his family, but then due to PTSD and depression was discharged. And although his commanding officer recommended an honourable one, he was suddenly given a general one, which kind of made him even more bitter about everything than he already had been. And so he thought, what with that, as well as separating from his wife, he just needed to get away and start afresh, and what better place to do that than New Orleans. Addie Hall was something of a free spirit and had quite a kind of bohemian personality to her. She wrote poetry, she was a dancer, and she also worked at the pub The Spotted Cat, which is where she and Zach met. However, people who knew her would say that it often felt like Addie was trying to run from something, possibly her past. It's often speculated that she was the victim of abuse, not only as a child, but also through relationships that she'd had previously. On top of that, she suffered from bipolar disorder, which she took medication for. And it's strongly suspected that she also suffered from PTSD due to the abuse that she'd suffered. However, regardless of this, there was definite attraction between the two of them, and when Hurricane Katrina hit in August of 2005, the two of them decided, instead of evacuating like most of the people of New Orleans were, they were going to actually stay and ride out the storm together. After Hurricane Katrina had passed, the two of them actually surprisingly seemed to thrive in the aftermath. Alongside the two of them, there were also a small number of other people who had also decided to stay, and they seemed to almost form like a small kind of community of survivors, and they seemed to actually do really well in that kind of scenario. They would trade goods with others, they would serve drinks to passers-by, and they basically kind of treated the whole thing as the kind of big camping holiday, really. It wouldn't take too long for the two of them to start falling in love with each other, but it didn't take long before the cracks in their relationship started to show through. When people began to, return to New Orleans and the city kind of started to get back on its feet again, and people had responsibilities again of having to pay bills and go to work and everything else, things began to take a turn for the worse for the young couple. Friends would say that they were constantly fighting, and sometimes that fighting would get physical. Addie was known to be a bit of a mean drunk when she'd had too much alcohol, and she had stopped taking her medication for bipolar. Now, whether that was because she'd simply run out of it and was unable to get any more because of the disaster, or whether she'd simply chosen to stop taking it for whatever reason, I don't know. But this kind of aggravated things and made things a lot worse, obviously. As for Zach, obviously his mental health wasn't great either. He'd not had any kind of help for the PTSD or the depression that he had, and obviously when the army showed up in New Orleans in the aftermath to try to help things through, obviously that would also spark his PTSD from his time in the army as well. And on top of that, both of them drank a lot, and it's also believed that they did drugs together as well. So, you know, substance abuse on top of mental health problems, it's just a terrible, terrible recipe for disaster, and just the whole relationship was just a completely toxic one. As a way to try to salvage their relationship and basically start afresh, Zach and Addie decided to move house, and they ended up moving into the apartment above the Voodoo Temple on Rampart Street. However, they wouldn't live there for very long. On October 4th, Addie went to their landlord to ask for Zach's name to be taken off the lease. Apparently she'd discovered that he'd been cheating on her and had decided to kick him out. The landlord, however, basically told her to go home and try to work things out and come back at another time, and that would be the last time anyone would see Addie alive. When Zach discovers what Addie had planned to do, this sparked another fight, and he ended up strangling her to death. Some sources that I've read have said that after strangling her, he then violated her body several times before passing out. However, according to police reports, this wasn't the case, so I'm not really too sure one way or the other how true that is. Obviously in the journal entry there was mention of this, but you know, it is kind of hard to really tell considering what kind of mindset he was in at the time. What is known, however, is that the following day he went to work as usual, and his workmates would later say that he seemed to be in quite a quiet and somber mood, which, you know, if you've just murdered your partner in cold blood, isn't really all that surprising. However, he simply told them that he and Addie had broken up again, and that she had apparently moved out of New Orleans, which really surprised people because anyone who knew them knew how much Addie adored living in New Orleans, and so the thought of her moving out of there, you know, it wasn't something that people expected to hear really, but they kind of, I assume, put it down to the fact of her needing a clean break from everything that has happened. Over the next 4 days or so, Zach would move Addie's body to the bathroom where he dismembered her using a hacksaw and a knife, before then cooking her in the oven and on the stove where police had found her, and during the next kind of week and a half or so, friends of Zach would say that he was in surprisingly good spirits, and kind of more like his usual self, and was even talking about taking a vacation somewhere, which, you know, is kind of astounding, really, considering what was going on, like, behind closed doors, and the absolutely horrendous crime that he had committed, and obviously, you know, his suicide afterwards. When the story of the murder-suicide hit the news, it shook the people of New Orleans to their core. You know, it was such a gruesome and horrible thing to happen, and people just weren't expecting something like that. A lot of people theorised as to why it happened, and there was some speculation that because the apartment was over the voodoo temple, that some kind of dark entity or energy had influenced Zach to do what he did. Personally, I'm a little skeptical on this idea. I'm not ruling it out entirely, because I'm a big believer in, you know, both dark and light entities and energy and everything, but yeah, I'm skeptical on this just because of the fact of sometimes the demons in our head are scarier than the ones outside, and the fact that there were so many factors in this story that led to this absolutely tragic ending. Yeah, like I said, sometimes the scariest demons are the ones inside our heads, and Zach and Addie weren't getting the help and the support that they obviously needed, and unfortunately it led to this absolutely tragic end. I've recently learnt that not only does the apartment still have the oven, stove and fridge that Zach used to cook and store Addie's remains in, you can actually go to the apartment now and like be given a tour of the place, and people actually do like paranormal investigations and the like there too. Personally, I find it really quite disturbing and quite disrespectful, not only to Zach and Addie but also to their families and friends and people who knew them. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely adore the paranormal and true crime, and I find it fascinating, but this just feels a little bit too much to me. What happened was absolutely horrendous, and I think the souls of Zach and Addie, wherever they may be, deserve some form of respect, honestly, as well as their families and friends and people who knew and loved them. I don't know, I just find it an incredibly sad story. As someone who suffers with mental health myself, both with depression and anxiety, and also know people who have bipolar and PTSD, I know how important it is to get the help and the support needed. And I mean, it's hard sometimes when you do have the help and the support, but it's even harder when you don't have it. And, you know, there's absolutely nothing wrong with saying, look, I'm struggling, I need help. And I can't help but wonder how different things may have been for both Zach and Addie if they had been given the help and the support that they needed. It's just so sad, and no one should have to suffer with that kind of thing. I know that, you know, they may not have always helped themselves with the drinking and the drugs and the like, but, you know, neither of them deserved an end like that. And I hope that wherever they are, they're at some kind of peace. Okay, that's the end of today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you kind of semi-enjoyed it, at least, if enjoy is the right word. If you did, then be sure to leave a like and comment down below. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload whenever I bring out a new video. Until then, stay safe and sweet dreams.